Hey everyone, before I get started, I just want to remind you that if you like my content, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and then join the Militiaman and Crew Patreon community by clicking the link in the caption. Good evening everybody, Militiaman here. Hey, it's Wednesday evening and I want to just say hello and say, look, we've got today was a pretty fascinating news day. I don't have a whole heck of a lot, but I do have a few articles that I'm going to go over that'll probably keep us a little bit busy. And by the way, everybody that is being so helpful with our patreon.com/mm and crew site is so much appreciated. Thank you everybody that's come in, the newbies that came in. I see people coming in still. That's great. Get acquainted. Gigi will log you guys in, and we have Samson. She brings in the news. There's some rules, which is pretty common. We got a few people, so it's important that we use those rules. But hey, everybody, appreciate you all coming. Welcome. And hey, look, what we do here today is going to just get started. This article came out today on Wednesday. The Economist talks about new measures for after stopping transfers. New measures after stopping transfers. What they're talking about, transfers of the auctions, if you will, I believe. So it says the statements and interviews conducted by the governor of the Central Bank of Iraq, Ali Alak, in New York over a 3-day period, that's recently in the past, with the U.S. Treasury officials gave a new boost to confidence to the Iraqi banking system. So it sounds like this last meeting was a little better than the one that was about a little bit, I think it was back in July. It seemed like that one might have been a little rough on Alak, but we'll see. Well, we may not, but the interesting thing is it sounds like, well, in this case, they say it gave a new boost in confidence to the Iraqi banking system. It says Al-Tamimi, an economist who's basically stated that the advanced steps to join the global banking system in terms of expanding experience and international banking relations, which will increase knowledge in control procedures for foreign transfers and direct sales of the dollar. So now is the time where they have finally got it sorted for the banking industry in Iraq to be on board with international standards and compliance. I think it was a rocky road for them. I think that the dollar auctions was such a cash cow, if you will, that it was very difficult for those that had been going after Al-Alak for quite some time, trying to diminish his reputation, etc., try to get rid of him, call him on the carpet. It didn't work. And a lot of those were politicians that got probably dirty hands. I don't know that for a fact, that's just an allegation, but the neat part about it is that they seem to have subsided. And the news coming out now is phenomenal with what's going on with the Central Bank of Iraq, al-Sudani's reforms, the U.S. Treasury, the U.S. Fed, everybody that's involved, World Bank, even implications of maybe we could hear something from the WTO in the short term, again, because they had a lot of really good news back in July and previous months about having completed requirements. So at this stage of the game, with these all these banks getting on board, I think we talked about yesterday, the day before, about 95% of those banks, we'll probably talk about that again, have been sorted. Now they started the process in 2003, and they've told us rather that no, we've actually done this and we're even further along, and we only have about 5% left, even if that's true, depending on the time frame which the context comes. So a lot of times articles don't give you the full context. So they could actually be further along than that remaining 5%. We'll see. It says that this will lead to the development of systems in line with international local standards, and the development of a system for covering foreign trade and protecting the banking and financial sector from money laundering and financing terrorism. So they basically are trying to eradicate that. The Central Bank of Iraq will stop dealing with foreign correspondent banks in the future and reduce reliance on them. So basically the Central Bank of Iraq and other central banks, they don't normally deal directly with foreign banks and correspondent banks. But in Iraq's case, because of the circumstances, they needed to do that. And so they did it for quite some time, and they had to clean that up. And it looks like that since the U.S. Treasury has been involved, and al-Sudani's been in town, Taif Sami, the Ministerial Council of Economics, has been around since late 2022. They've made inroads on the digital transformation, the electronic platforms, the electronic borders. They've done all those things. So this is like we're coming to a crescendo to where that they're finishing the processes up. It says they're basically going to do gradually end the work of the electronic platform and transfers, replacing it with direct banking, relations with Iraqi banks, and a network of international correspondent banks, in addition to achieving stability in the exchange rate in the local market. So they are moving on that. So much of what this economic expert is saying has been and is well underway. This last 3-day New York City meetings with Al-Alaq was to be somewhat of a follow-up from the following meetings in July, like I mentioned. So what we're seeing is that evidence of what we're seeing is Iraq basically getting ready to go international. What are they doing? They're basically setting the stage for more and more things to happen, and for people to realize where Iraq is in terms of international financial and banking systems, and systems of the world. Okay, it's pretty big. Cross-border payments in other foreign currencies is where they're at. We've heard them talk about the euro, the dirham, the yuan, all these different these currencies, etc., that will be involved. Even still with the dollar, it's not going to go away. And we also see, like the things that we talked about in the last few days, is Ernst & Young, KPMG, K2, international payment companies like what Visa, MasterCard, and MoneyGram. So we all know that those are those things that we've talked about that. So it's you guys, this theme here is going to be about them basically going international, as far as I can tell. This article says the government advisor talks between the Central Bank of Iraq and the U.S. Federal Reserve achieved advanced results. So this last meeting that we just mentioned is in New York City, been there for a few days, is in advanced stages. The Central Bank, Federal Reserve are good and consistent with the rules of work, so that's a big thing. What are they going to do? They're going to restore internal banking markets. So they did have discussions with the Central Bank and the Federal Reserve, and what are they doing? They're being consistent with that work that they normally do. So in other words, we're going to get away from what we did in the past, and we're going to be consistent with what we normally do. That's what they normally do. They don't necessarily work directly with Iraqi banks. They allow that to happen with correspondent banks, especially just like in the other outside source countries. They don't do that. So it's just a way of work, I believe. We note that the statement of the Central Bank of Iraq, there's significant optimism that the results of the discussions of the delegation that were in New York with the Federal Reserve in the United States of America, and in particular consultation with parties of the main banking system in the United States, specifically the large international banks concerned with international banking operations that cross the markets. That's a key statement right there, because they cross markets, cross-border payments. That's massive. So basically, what are they doing? They're going to have freedom of capital movement, and this reeks of circumstances that would be considered in compliance with Article 8 IMF rules. Not to mention potentially having Article 14 involved with the IMF, involved with that because of restrictions and cross-border payments, cross markets. That article specifically talks about cross markets. That's where Article 14 would probably come in, and we'll find out. It says it's basically an advanced model of understanding has been achieved at this stage. So they've come to an advanced situation with Iraq. Well, that's awesome. This came to document the path of steps and banking mechanisms adopted in foreign transfers, especially those related to financing foreign trade for the benefit of the Iraqi market, and ensuring a degree of fluidity and flexibility with the scopes of foreign transfer operations, and through effective roles that have been or will be played by global correspondent banking entities that enjoy high standards in terms of what strengthen compliance with the rules and regs, disclosures, and governance. That's what these guys are there for, professionalism at the highest levels, and that's what Iraq's is going to be up against. Ensuring fluidity and high flexibility. So they've got room to move, room to grow. Such corresponding bank entities across the world. So again, it's like, get the picture. Iraq isn't going to be isolated to herself. She's going to have an involvement across the world. So anyway, what they're up to is that these 13 private commercial banks that they talked to and referred to a few days ago, referred to the statements of talks issued by that Central Bank of Iraq, which dealt with the results of the talks between the monetary institutions and authorities of Iraq and the United States of America. So basically, what are we talking about here? They're going to allow implementation of what they believe is going to be clear, accurate a clear and accurate pathway to do what? Accelerating payments, settlements. They're going to be doing that. What are they doing it with? They're going to be doing it electronically. So what they're saying is these operations and settlement services that they will provide between Iraqi banks and correspondent international banks, as well as the beneficiaries in the trading financial cycles, in international trade, and exchange areas that Iraq deals with by paying in different reserve currencies. So that's pretty heavy. It's kind of a hard little sentence to go over, but different reserve currencies. So obviously Iraq's going to be using what? The dinar with other reserve currencies. That's what it sounds like. They're not talking about using the dollar. That's not what they're talking about as far as I can tell. Noting that in addition to the dollar as a payment and settlement currency, okay, in addition to the dollar, which I told you before, other international currencies such as the euro, the pound sterling, the Chinese yuan will take over that task. And so down to important stable currencies such as the UAE, dirham, and the Indian rupee they bring in. They didn't talk about Egypt, but on other currencies, but we'll just leave it at that. And the basis of this coordination with the monetary authorities in the United States comes from the fact that the source of the country's basic reserves before going to diversify other international currencies is the US dollar itself. And that's what they've been doing all along. So that doesn't sound like it's going to change, which is verified from the oil receipts deposited in the oil dollar currency at the Federal Reserve Bank. And they go on to say that this is consistent with standard operating rules adopted in international banking. And the key part here is especially in the matter of building foreign banking relations and the safety of moving money through global financial and banking systems. So especially in the matter of building foreign banking relations and the safety of moving money through the global financial and banking systems should have everybody thinking to themselves, man, so they are going global. That's what they're talking about. So anyway, the Prime Minister's advisor is hoping, that I can see, is opening up Iraq to the world in big time. And that's my view. Doing international business and doing business with those cross-border payments will require a country to have an internationally accepted currency, trading in the international Forex market. Those are the things that we see happening and coming. Those are my words, my opinion. All of the currencies that Iraq will be doing business with are now in compliance with the international standards and traded on the Forex. So with respect to that, I think it's time for everybody to sit back, relax, watch it as it happens. I think we're all, excited. Maintain some groundedness, if you will, because I believe there's no stopping this at this stage of the game. They have so many things that they're telling us. It's powerful and it's truly amazing. And here they say I say there's no stopping it. And they have a quote that I snipped out. It says, especially in the matter of building foreign banking relations and the safety of moving money through the global financial and banking systems. To me, that's very, very telling, you guys. Global banking relations, global financial and banking systems, and they're talking about who? Talking about Iraq. Very good stuff. We got a couple more to go through. Central Bank of Iraq reveals the mechanism for ending the electronic platform. And this was today. Electronic platform for foreign transfers managed by the central bank of Iraq began in early 2023 as a first phase to reorganize financial transfers to ensure proactive controls over them instead of subsequent control through the Federal Reserve auditing daily transfers. This was an exceptional measure on the Federal Reserve's part, and they don't usually do that. It says a gradual shift was planned towards building direct relationships between banks in Iraq and foreign correspondent and approved banks, mediated by international auditing companies. I wouldn't be surprised if that's Ernst & Young, KPMG, K2, other companies, right? It says 95% of the transfer process from the electronic platform to the correspondent banking mechanisms directly between it and Iraqi banks has been achieved. So they started this in 2023, but now during the year 2024, up to today, it says 95% of the transfer process from the electronic platform to the correspondent banking mechanism directly between it and Iraqi banks has been achieved. I said it twice because it's important, which means that only about 5% of it remains within the platform, which will be transferred using the same mechanisms before the end of this year and according to plan. You guys, that's pretty phenomenal, because if they've already told you, they didn't tell you this before, but they said they already started back in 2023, but they've got it 95% completed now, they could have even more done than that, because why? They didn't tell us when they got started. They don't give you any context on that. But they go on to say, it says, with some of these expectations, possible effects on the exchange rate and transfer operations are baseless. So basically, because we will not be sudden or one to go at the end of this year, but rather it was originally achieved during the past period. They're talking about 2023. And in that past period, with effort and careful follow-up, except for the remaining small percentage of what will be accomplished in the coming short period. So you don't know what that coming short period is. I mean, it could be minutes, it could be days, it could be months, but obviously at this stage of the game, it's probably could be done. I don't know, we'll see. Central Bank of Iraq confirms that the trade with the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, India, and China represents about 70% of Iraq's foreign trade as imports, which prompted the Central Bank of Iraq to find channels for transfer in euros, Chinese yuan, Indian rupees, and UAE dirhams. And here we go again, through approved correspondent banks in those 13 Iraqi banks that we've already mentioned. But here they say the 13 Iraqi banks have actually begun to conduct transfer operations with a pre-audit mechanism that has been agreed upon and approved in addition to transfers in the dollar. So they've already approved it. They have actually begun to conduct those transfer operations with a pre-audit mechanism, probably with those big entities, that has been agreed upon and approved in addition to the transfers in dollars. I have to say, you guys, to me, when I read that, it means they've actually begun to conduct these transfers. So at this stage of the game, they may not have exposed it to us yet, but they're doing it in their world. And is it behind the scenes? Is it contractual? Is it in this process of being exposed? They're telling you that it's in the process of at least being exposed. They're making us aware of it. And basically they're saying we're providing channels for personal transfers. Well, what's a personal transfer? That's like me and you, isn't it? Sounds like it. For legitimate purposes and external purchases, legitimate purposes, external purposes through the electronic payment channels, global money transfer companies. What was that? Visa, MasterCard, MoneyGram, cash sales to travelers, and paying cash dollars for income transfers to the parties and purposes specified in the central bank's published instructions. So I don't know, you guys. It sounds like, are they doing it right now? I mean, this is from today. So we're going to find out. Tomorrow's the last banking day in Iraq of this week, and we'll see what they do. But here it goes. The Central Bank of Iraq stresses that it has placed foreign transfer operations and meeting dollar demands on sound paths consistent with international practices and standards, and their anti-money laundering and terrorist financing laws. So they basically, if they've begun it, they're doing it. So how long until they expose exactly how they're doing it, and in what matter, and in what exchange rate are they doing it with, and what comparison? Because if they're going to be using the dinar, why wouldn't they expose that they're still doing it at 1310? They haven't yet, have they? No. There could be a good solid reason for that. So this is coming from the central bank, by the way, what I just read to you. That's from the central bank. It says what they did was they have price stability, they had controlled inflation. It says any other price traded outside these channels is considered abnormal pricing. Those that do it are what? Unorthodox and illegal practices. So they want to avoid official channels in their dealings, so be careful about that. And basically those folks are going to bear the additional costs by purchasing the citizens. If you're doing that, if you're using the parallel market, you're using the black market, purchasing at a higher price than the official price is basically a bad thing. And these folks are trying to delude others into believing there's a difference between the official and the other pricing. So they're basically trying to rip people off, and they're still doing it. So. But ultimately, I think that they've got a grip on this, and now that they've got 95% and or less, I think that they're basically getting to that stage where they're going to keep rolling it out. It says, but in my view, I have to go back to the 2023. They've already started it, and they came into 2024, and what we're seeing now is the end results. So that last 5% to complete isn't very much if it hasn't been finished. So that's that in a nutshell. And last thing I'm going to have to go over is that if you guys remember that the Turkmenistan model that we talked about more than once over the years, was a model that they used because it was successful in a revaluation process. And we have, I think there's probably an 81-page document on that, or at least, yeah, pretty close. It's pretty lengthy. Not 81 pages, but it's a lot of pages that talks about that process. And you can get a lot of that in patreon.com, and you can go back over that. But the main focus here is they give you another model. Okay, it's called the Dollar Dilemma Sri Lanka as a model. It says, to me, when I was reading it, what works is used just like the Turkmenistan model for revaluations. In this particular case, they're talking about the dollar. And they're talking about there's many countries, or rather emerging and rising economies, that share the phenomena like Sri Lanka, like Iraq, etc. And because of a feature of the fluctuation of the dollar exchange rate and other impacts on their economies and their exposure to financial and economic crises periodically. Iraq's not immune to crises, economic, right? If you remember a few years back, they had ISIS, then they also had the oil shocks and the pricing of that. They had to go borrow money. All those things have been studied, and they've understand it. And so what has Iraq gone to? A non-oil basis. These electronic platforms, so they can take advantage of collecting that money that's at the borders for the tourism. They're getting back their artifacts. They're doing all these things to be able to provide services for everybody and to provide income. We haven't seen the Turkish pipeline open yet. Well, why? Because we're waiting for that exchange rate, I believe. The salaries, et cetera, that we've been talking about, have they been completely 100% distributed yet? Well, no, they haven't shown us that they have, but they're talking about them getting their money electronically. So it's like it's almost everything's waiting on and hinging on one major item. So we'll have to follow this as close as possible, and we'll study it, and we'll bring it and share it with you in Militiaman and Crew at patreon.com in our Discord chat room. It says here a number of economic experts advise the necessity of changing the exchange rate system and trying to find exchange rates for currency basket, because Iraq talked about the basket we already did with all those other currencies. But even in regionally, okay, it says i.e. for each foreign currency in the components of the basket and with specific relative weights according to the trade areas to which the country is linked externally. So what does it do? It's in order to get rid of or reduce parallel market pricing and bring them to a state of balance with the official exchange rate. So there's been a lot of talk about BRICS, etc. This article talks about that. But basically, what have they said? It says that at this particular point, Sri Lanka basically achieved simple results from cooperation, especially in the field of settling cash payments through its currencies, and it's hoped that it will be able to break the dollar monopoly in the long term. Well, that's probably right. They might very well do that. But if you remember, one of the things that our country talked about was leveling the playing field. And there was laws done in 2020 that talked about that. They talked about specifically undervalued currencies. And they talked about many countries. I think people probably remember Iraq is an undervalued currency. People probably remember that. Completely different circumstances. I don't study it, but there was a focus on the Vietnamese dong, for instance, and there were some other currencies. But any of them that fit that FIMA, I think it's FIMA, International Monetary Authority, and believe it or not, they have one where it's about the currency manipulation law. I think they were on April 6, 2020, if you guys can dig in deep. Not easy to find, but if you do, you'll know that what I say is true. These things probably have come to play, and we're going to see the results. I mean, that's 4 years ago, well over. So, hey, it takes time to get things done, but now we're watching all of these things come together at the end. I think Iraq has made significant adjustments to what they've been doing. I think their non-oil revenue streams is going to bring value to their country. If you remember, we talked about it numerous times, that Iraq was based on their past glory days was based off of just oil. I don't know if you guys realize this, but Iraq has a lot more than just oil. Okay, they have a lot more. And when they talk about liquid natural gas, that's a massive amount of income. They used to burn it and flare it and just waste it. Now they're going to produce it and ship it likely to Europe. All kinds of geopolitical things and thoughts about that. But the bottom line is, I'm not going to get into politics or any of it, just that know that they're going to bottle that gas and sell it. And they're going to have more oil. If you guys remember, if you've been paying attention, they have a lot of more oil deposits. They've been talking about more oil. They're talking about leasing. So they're not only going to increase their oil, but they're going to increase their revenue streams, the non-oil revenue streams. And so that's where all the ability to be able to support the value of their currency, far more than some of the regional countries. Better. Doesn't mean there'll be more, but they'll be competitive at least. So let's just see what these guys do. But the news out of late is completely off the charts, and it points to, I believe, internationalism is where Iraq's headed, and I don't believe for a minute that they're going to stop until they complete it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Stick with us. Hit my like buttons or subscribe buttons if you would, please. And then again, everybody that's been helping keep our site going. Oh, by the way, I want to thank, couldn't have Pompey Peter on it today, but we did have a call and an audio that you guys can find in Patreon, and it's posted. It's Petra and I have a conversation about what we believe, where we are, and what to expect. So if you're interested in that point of view, come on into Patreon, and all of those that are already in there, I hope you guys enjoyed it and are watching and listening, I should say, to that particular case, to get excited, know what you own, and that's what we do. So thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate your time, and we do have PayPal, Venmo, and Zelle to bring more in as it comes, and we will keep doing so. Thank you. Once again, guys, don't forget to hit that like button if you like this content, subscribe to the channel, or join us at the Militia Man and Crew Patreon community for even more exclusive content. You can also donate to this channel by hitting the links in the banner to help keep this page up and running. Your generous support is greatly appreciated, as always. Much, much appreciated. Thank you so much, and have a great day.